power of a story is the story itself. Just because a person isn't world famous, that doesn't make their story any less powerful. My name's Griot Josh, and I'm here to tell all the stories. All right, thank you everyone for tuning into this amazing interview. I'm very excited. This is, a new friend, Mr. R. Alan Brooks. If you want to look him up on social media, we'll be calling him Alan for the duration of the show. And yes, let's get right into it. So I was introduced to him, if you will, when you posted your TED Talk. That's kind of how I was like, I think, are you in the Comic Nerds of Color?
No, wait, it's the Facebook group? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Are you? I can't remember if you're in
I,
CNOC or not.
I'm in a whole bunch of them, and I don't remember.
Okay.
I'm in Color of Fandom. I'm in Black Comics Creators. So yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna say there's limited. I feel like if you're in one, you're in most.
All right.
But yeah, you posted it, and I was like, "What? Black guy doing okay?"
Oh, State of Black Science Fiction.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah.
State of Black Science Fiction. Yeah, I don't remember them all. I was like, okay, and then I watched it. I was like, yo, I wish it had been longer than 12 minutes. Like I feel like you were just warming up. B, so this was recorded during the pandemic, right?
Yeah, there was no audience. They were like, I don't know, maybe 10 people in the room, and and they weren't allowed to react. They just treated it like a studio shoot. And I was like, I know I'm saying funny stuff, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Because I was wondering. I was like, yo, he had some very well-timed punchlines, but like nobody was reacting. So I was like, I was wondering if it was empty. And then that's when I looked at the date. I was like, oh, this was during a quarantine time.
The funny thing though is when they so it was originally a TEDx talk, and then it did pretty well, and then TED.com decided to post it on their front page, and that's when it kind of really blew up, right? So with the TEDx, I think it was like 37,000 views or something. But then when they posted on TED.com, it was like 500,000 in the first day, which was crazy.
Yeah.
But for the TED.com version, they added applause at the beginning, which I thought was cool.
Gotcha. That's neat. Okay, so take us, before we get into like the nitty gritty of who Alan is, take us through that. Like, what is it like preparing the talk, how that even came to be, and then just like the aftermath. Like I saw a little bit of you posting on Facebook, but like, what was that? And I'm sure many people have asked you this, but I'm curious, like, what was that? What's that like?
Okay, so I was referred to TEDx Mile High by, I think, someone who works there and was kind of familiar with what I do. And I proposed, like, you propose talks, and they didn't choose me for the first year, and then they kind of came back around to me, which was cool. So
wow. Did you re-pitch the talk, or they just kind of came back like, hey, can you do that thing that we said no to last time?
Yeah, a little bit of the latter, but also in the interim, they saw me lead sort of a workshop. I did a workshop for one of the TEDx events, and the guy who started it walked in on it. He was like, "Wow, these people are really into what you're saying," Because I mean, it's hard to get a sense of how much somebody can hold a crowd based on their pitch over the phone, Yeah. So so eventually they decided they want to do it, and so I don't know how it is with every TEDx, but with Mile High TEDx, they're very like on it. Like, you work on it, you write a draft of it, and then they basically coach you through it for, I think, maybe 2 or 3 months.
Okay.
And get you to the point where like it's all edited and everything, and then you have to memorize it.
Yeah.
And so they give you like memorization tricks and exercises to help you do that kind of stuff.
That's cool.
Yeah, so all of that was really dope. And so when it came down to do it, of course, like I said, there wasn't really much of an audience, but
yeah.
So I try to just give it all my heart. But it was important to me to talk about something that was true to my soul, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, they were receptive to the message that I wanted to give and weren't trying to like change it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so then I did it in August and it got posted maybe in October, the TEDx one.
Okay.
And and then February 1st is when it got moved to TED.com on the front page. And that was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like 500,000 people on the first day. That's more people than I've ever seen me do anything. I think
Right.
now it's like 880,000 or something like that. So it's been
Okay.
about a month.
Yeah.
And so I've been getting like people contacting me from all over the world. Um, some through my website, some through Instagram, some through
Mm.
Facebook. People from Australia, Mexico, India,
Wow. Yeah.
and that's really touching because I really was sharing something that was important to my heart, and to see that it resonated with all these people is really wonderful, man.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely, I think that was what drew me to it most. Cause when it comes to TED Talks, because there's so many,
Hmm.
like in the beginning, it was like, okay, you could kind of watch most TED Talks, but then it
All
kind of
right.
exploded. And so for me, I'm always looking for like, okay, after 3 minutes, am I buying into this? Do I really feel the soul, or does it just feel like, just
Right.
a technical conversation? And just the story of stories itself
Mhm.
that you were kind of like weaving in there, I picked up. I was like, oh, there's a little bit of a meta context happening here, where he's talking about telling your story without saying tell your story, until you conclude at the end. But I also noticed that you told, I don't want to say an unusual, but an unpopularized story of blackness and being
Mhm.
black. Very much reminding me of uh, kind of like Fresh Prince esque, in the sense of how he was in the show, where he knew of all these, like, the typical quote unquote black stories, but he was the guy with books in his pizza box. Like, he came to Bel Air and acted like he was hard because he was from Philly, but really he was just a nerd,
Mhm.
who liked to play basketball, who talked too much. He was a nerd with a sense of humor, and for that kind of story to be on display, like, just and how you did it without, it was well crafted. It was very well crafted. Like, you didn't
Right on.
stray too far in any one spot, and you moved through it pretty nicely. How how did you how did you feel giving it, I guess? And was there anything, like, having done it and sat with it, with all these people reaching out to you, is there anything that you would add to it if you were to give that talk again?
Mm. Let's see. So, in terms of the first part of your question, um, I think I practiced it enough times that I was able to edit things and get it to where I did include all the things that were important to me,
Okay. Yeah.
um, and just kind of let that talk be what it is. I I'm the same with in terms of the second part of your question. I have the same approach towards writing, like writing graphic novels. Is
Mm-hmm.
that when it's finished, I know it's finished. You know, I think part of one of the problems that we as creative people encounter is that we try to like fit everything into, like, when we're writing something, this one thing, or drawing something, or making a song, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
this one thing has to represent the full expanse of our humanity, right? And it's impossible for any one thing to do that.
Very true.
So um, so by taking that pressure off myself, then the most important thing becomes, what am I trying to say in this moment, in this
Mm.
venue? And I do feel happy with how it came across. I mean, certainly, having grown up in a lot of environments where people did not welcome my geekier ways or more intellectual ways, to be able to talk about those things and have people all over the world connect with it.
Yeah.
Like, if you would have told 10-year-old me that it was possible, I would never have believed it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. So in the talk, because from a an aspiring, I don't want to say aspiring artist. I'm definitely an artist and a writer, but
Right
someone
on.
who's aspiring to live
Yeah.
off of
Knock
what
that
he.
aspiring off of it. Yeah,
Right, right,
that's
right,
good.
right. I'm a writer and an artist. But I noticed you're like, yeah, I make a living as an artist, and I was like, I don't know if anyone noticed, but that's a pretty boss statement to say. So tell it. I know you didn't really get too much about into that in the talk, but so
Yeah,
what was that like? Like you talked about transitioning out of the financial business, but I
right.
know that you can't. Nobody. Well, I don't want to say nobody, but it's difficult to just jump from one into something as unpredictable as art. So
Yeah.
what is that like?
No, that's a good question, man. It's not easy. Like, but if it's important, no. Okay, I don't want to say it in such a way. Like, so some people can just make art and they have like a family and a house in the suburbs or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not in a place to make particular sacrifices. So I don't want to make any of those people feel bad.
For sure.
Uh, I do think that those people, like, if you want to make stuff, you got to pick a time and you just got to work on it. Like even if it's once a week. But uh, in my case, I didn't have any kids, and so I
Mm-hmm.
decided, okay, this is important enough to me that I'm going to treat it like a business. So first order of business is reduce all my expenses. So I was renting a house, and my number one expense was rent. So I put the word out that I was looking to rent a room in somebody's house, and
Oh,
I did that, and that wasn't the greatest thing,
yeah, yeah.
But by reducing my expenses greatly, it meant that I could do smaller things to meet my bills, and then work on expanding my art, right? So I spent maybe 2.5 years living in a room in somebody's house,
Whoa.
and then I treated it like a business. So um, first of all, like for most artists, finishing a thing is
Right,
like the hardest thing, right?
right.
But that's only half the job. When you finish it, you got to market it, right? So you got to learn how to write press releases.
Mm.
You have to show up to events where people are doing things that are related to your art. Uh, so I'll just tell you and whoever's listening that the press doesn't care that you're putting out something new. They just don't care. What they do care about is if what you're doing connects to some social issue that they're already going to write about, right? So
Mm.
The Burning Metronome, my first graphic novel, there's one chapter that deals with police brutality. So I sent out a press release that said a graphic novel deals with police brutality. And fortunately, that happened to be something that they were interested in. If not, I would have pulled out one of the other things that happens in the book and wrote another press release and sent it out to a whole bunch of places.
Yeah.
Also, I sent it out to maybe 50 places, and one outlet responded. And then once that story dropped, I sent it back out as covered by this outlet, and
Yeah.
you just kind of build from there. Um,
Wow. That's remarkable resilience.
right on. And I would say, like I'm fundamentally an introvert, which like I'm good at talking to people, but it drains me. So like this pandemic has been actually just fine for me, like not going places.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so, but I know that people need to connect a face and a personality to the work that I do. So I do show up, and I started speaking in high schools for free,
Mm-hmm.
trying to build a following that way. Um, at the conventions, I got tables at Denver Comic Con
Yeah,
to
those
begin
aren't
with.
cheap.
No, yeah. And then I had to stand out in front of my table and hustle, like make
Yeah.
eye contact with thousands of people and be like, hey, um, what are you into? Let's talk about it, and people connected with me as a person, and then they wanted to buy my stuff, which was pretty dope.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I mean, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of hustle. There's this podcast called How I Built This. It's on NPR.
Yeah. I listened to
Guy
that.
Raz.
Guy, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So you listen to people talk about how they built their businesses. How they built Home Depot or whatever, right? I feel like artists often don't treat our work in the same way. We just kind of feel like once we create it, it should just attract the world to it, right?
Right. It's
Um,
so genius.
right. But
Yeah.
what I've
I
realized is
feel it.
that there are some, I'm not going to name any names, but there's some people who create garbage art, and they're not shy. So, like, I feel like if I feel like what I do is better than garbage, then I shouldn't be shy,
Yeah.
right? And some of those people are hustlers. Like, they get their stuff done. They're out there. They're like making like all kinds of different products off their stuff, and I'm like, all right, I ain't gonna be mad at you. I'm gonna learn what you do and I'm gonna do it.
Right. Yeah. Definitely
And
got to get out and get that hustle on.
yeah, and I got to be pretty good at it. I mean, I didn't mention this in the TED Talk,
Hmm.
maybe very briefly, but like I was a hip hopper for a long time. Like
Yeah.
so,
You mentioned rapping. I was going to ask you
oh
about that.
word. Okay. So that hip hop hustle in the world of comic books,
Hmm.
it is easy to be a stronger personality than a lot of comic book creators because it's just not the same, right? Like hip hop is full of big personalities,
Yeah.
uh, and comics are not as much. So yeah, so a lot of that hustle translates, and I was really like stunting on them, and then I met the guys from Stranger Comics. Are you familiar with
Oh,
them?
Sebastian
So,
and them.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and they are on a whole nother level of hustle. Like,
Yo,
yeah, like I love
crazy
it.
with his hustle. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and he is very generous with sharing. Like, because he's been doing this for 20. I mean, I put out my first graphic novel in 2017,
Hmm.
and it's just led to all these other things. But him and his crew, the three principal guys, Daryl, Sebastian, and Josh, they've been doing it for like 20 years.
Yeah.
So they have a lot of knowledge and experience, and but they really make it happen, man. Like
Yeah.
they make it an experience. If you walk past their table and you make eye contact with anybody,
Yep.
you're
That's
going to get
it.
sold to. Right,
That's it. And they always have two people like in cosplay of like Niobe, and they all know everything too. It's yeah,
right,
it's definitely an
yeah,
experience. But yeah, and yeah, 20 years of that, and they just got that TV deal. I think like 2 years ago at this point, because I
right,
think it was like right before everything kind of shut down that they announced
yeah,
I think the HBO deal.
yeah,
So
yeah. So I mean, I just feel like if you treat it like a business, I mean, number one thing is reduce your expenses however you can, right? And
yeah.
so I reduced my expenses and I did a Kickstarter campaign, and so it meant that I was not coming out of my own pocket,
Hmm.
that I was able to live very inexpensively while I worked on adding things. And so um, basically I started trying to like make myself that dude, right? Like the dude that when you think of comics in
Hmm.
Denver. And I knew I had gotten there when the Black Panther movie came out, because both the Denver Post and Westward, which is basically like the Village Voice here,
Okay.
um, they both called me to ask about my opinion on the cultural ramifications of the Black Panther movie coming out.
Oh.
Yeah. And I was like, I guess I'm that guy.
Right,
you know,
right, right. Doing some things
right,
out here. Yeah.
right. And now I'm at the point where if people Google like Denver comic books, they will find my name. And
Yeah.
but a lot of that is the press releases, building a website, doing interviews, showing up, speaking any place that I could, and all of that like works cumulatively to oh, and I host podcasts too. So all of
Yeah.
those things
Yeah, I
work
saw that
together.
today.
Right on. And it just works together to create this thing where you are almost the product more than the thing that you're creating,
Right.
you know.
Right. Which is the struggle I know of most artists. It's like I put
Yeah.
my energy into the thing that I made, not into me. Don't worry about me. I could be in
Right,
my
right.
mama's basement in an old hoodie. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about it. Look at
That's
what I made. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's how I was with hip hop, which is why I don't think anybody's ever heard of me as a rapper, right? Because I was just like the music is out,
Yeah.
stop trying to like, but
Don't worry about that.
but
Just
but
listen
I
to
really
it.
looked at Ava DuVernay, how like I know who she is more than I know what her movies are,
True.
and I thought about like Andy Warhol, like
Hmm.
I could identify a picture of him quicker than I could identify which paintings are his.
Yeah.
There's so many examples of that, and I mean even Stan Lee, right? Like sometimes people try to like shit talk Stan Lee, and there might be real reasons, but I think the key thing to recognize is that Marvel as an organization has gone through a lot of owners, and historically those owners have tried to screw over virtually everyone,
Yeah.
including Stan Lee. Like he had to sue them. So, but the reason that they had less ability to do that to him is because he made himself such a big media personality, whereas they could do it to Jack Kirby and or Steve Ditko, and who knows? Like no, most
Yeah.
people would know, right?
Yeah.
And Siegel and Schuster, the guy who's created Superman,
Hmm.
same thing. Like everybody knew Superman, but nobody knew them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's definitely. I saw last night. I finally watched Judas and the Black Messiah,
Oh yeah,
and that whole idea of anywhere there's people, there's power definitely applies even to something like this. Because if you can
yeah.
make yourself, in alignment with the people, then companies are like, oh, that's where the power is. All right, we'll give you an opportunity, or we'll back off, or we'll just do the right thing because you got the people behind you, not
It's
just
true.
because it's you.
Right.
So yeah, I definitely feel that. That's cool. I feel like we could have a whole other conversation about writing, but we're gonna go into the next part. So,
Okay.
at what point did you, or like as a kid, because like so for me, I've been writing, I don't know, since I was like a child. Before computers were commonplace, like I had a notebook and I would just write like short stories and everything.
Yeah.
And as a kid, you don't think about the severe improbability of being able to live off of the things that you create. You're just like, oh,
Right.
well, yeah, I read books. I go to the library. There's thousands of books. Clearly, there's a place for me when I become a big person. And so I never thought about, any struggle or anything. But I just knew as a kid, I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, I want to tell stories. I want to talk about stories. Batman, Superman Adventure, Static Shock. Um, did you know? Have you been? Well, I guess when did you start writing, and when did you kind of think about like, okay, this is what I would for real want to do?
That's a good question. It's a tricky question because I started reading comics when I was 5.
Wow.
Um, my dad wanted me to read. He wanted to encourage reading, so he got me into comics. And but I wasn't trying to write them. I was drawing comics back then, and that's like all I ever did. And then around 13 or 14, I got waylaid by rapping, and the payoff to rapping was a lot stronger because chicks dug it more than drawing
Hey,
comic books,
right,
right?
right.
Uh,
Pause here. You mentioned the hustle as far as rapping. Were you like selling like mixtapes and stuff also when you were in your rapping days?
yeah, and I went on a couple of tours, and this is growing up in Atlanta. I was in a lot of battles. Like that's I love battling. Like I was sneaking
Wow.
into clubs before I was old enough to get in, just
Yeah,
so I could battle. You know.
I would love to see that because you're so like Clark Kent in your regular demeanor. I would love to see you just turned up and just like a hoodie on over a cap
Right.
and just killing people. All right, that's
Yeah.
that's cool. That's cool. So
Well, yeah. So there's a so I basically was focused on hip hop for a lot of years,
mhm.
and put all my energy into it, and just didn't get back what I had hoped. Um, so in terms of like writing stories, that really happened just a few years ago.
Wow,
Yeah, and so
interesting.
basically, I got to the point with hip hop where I was doing like 50 shows a year. I would hire like jazz musicians to back me up,
Hmm.
because that would get
That's
me
pretty
into
good.
venues. Oh, right on, yeah. It would get me into venues that wouldn't normally hire like a rap act. But
Uh,
also the reason I hire jazz musicians is because they can improv. So like if some drunk person walks on stage, for example, which would happen like once a year, uh, usually a blonde female drunk person, they would walk on stage, and I could be in the middle of a song and
mhm.
cue my musicians, go into something else, start freestyling, make fun of the person, get them off stage, and then
Yeah,
go right back into the song, which you can't really do with musicians who don't know how to improv. You
right.
know, so yeah, I was doing that for a lot of years, and I
That's
got to the
you got a
point.
sharp mind. For anyone who doesn't know, to have a memorized thing go off into a made up thing and come back to your memorized thing is not a common skill.
Yeah, it's true. But yeah, so it was going dope, man. But the musicians I was hiring at the time, I had like sort of a regular band, and they were always mad. Like they were paying their rent off of our shows,
Hmm.
So like they were, all they had to do was show up and play, but they would just be mad all the time, and I don't even know what about. But just the bad attitude started like bringing me down, and I was like, man, for all this stress, I can do something square and
Mm.
at least make a living, you know.
Yeah.
And so that's how I ended up in insurance. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I did that for 4 years, and did okay, but hated it.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and I even worked with some good people. There were some good people, but it just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And then then I just decided I was gonna go back to my first love, which was comics, and try my hand at writing something. And here we are.
Wow. So, for mathematical context, Bernie Metronome came out in 2017,
Yeah.
and you said you stopped doing insurance 4 years before that. So it's 2013.
Oh no, no. I did insurance for 4 years. So I
Oh, okay,
stopped
okay,
it.
okay,
I stopped in 2016
okay,
and
okay, okay.
started writing the Burning Metronome and put it out in 2017.
That's a heck of a hustle.
Yeah, I ain't playing. I ain't
That
here to
that
play.
kind of turned out right. Clearly, clearly, that's that battle rapper energy coming out.
Yeah, the brother who drew the Burning Metronome, he's a really cool guy, Dion Harris.
Yeah.
He struggled a little bit with the schedule, and I felt like, man, you were holding up my life, you know, and like I'd be angry about it, and I was like, come on, man, we got to get this done. And like in my head, I was like, man, I'm gonna go tell him, but he was like, he's swole, brother, in the Navy and stuff like that.
Oh, made
So
you rethink yourself.
yeah, yeah. So I didn't tell him too hard, but but we made it through though. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And the art looks great. I was looking through the first issue earlier today, and the art, I was like, this is slick art.
I word, yeah. And I felt blessed because I work with him, and then the guy who did the colors, Matt Strackbine, he did
Mhm.
colors and letters. That dude had the same, maybe even more hustle than me. Like that dude is about it, right?
Oh wow. Yeah.
He used to, so his main job is textile. So he used to design the Olympic ski team's uniforms. He did it
Okay.
for like 9 years. He designed for that company Spider. Like, so anywhere in the book where there's like a T-shirt design,
Mm-hmm.
where you see like a pattern on something, that's his stuff. He
Wow.
just, or paintings in the background. Dion would just draw a square, and then Matt would be like, this person seems like they would have this style of painting, and he would just put it in.
I
Yeah,
love it. I love it
yeah,
when artists are so submerged in it they can just flow. That's always cool.
yeah. So that was really to this day, Matt Strackmine is the only person who I feel like drove me as much as I drove him.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really good, collaboration. I actually wanted to talk about like specifically about what he and Dion did in the TED Talk.
Yeah.
That is one thing that I might have wanted to add, but they advised me to like edit it, because for time.
Okay.
So, but I didn't want them to feel like I'm talking about all this stuff and just not mentioning their names.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, for sure. For sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I know comics are a highly collaborative effort if you are not going to do the whole thing yourself, because that is also very draining. I've seen a few books where people have done it the whole thing themselves. I'm like,
yeah.
this you have to have a real check. This is not like a perspective check. Like you have to be paid to do something like that.
It's a lot of work. It is.
Yeah. So so you were rapping and performing, not really writing stories, and then you came over, you did insurance, and you're like, I don't want to do this, and decided to write stories. So from your rapping days, were you a deeply storyteller rapper? Because like I know some rappers lean towards like story, and some are like
Yeah,
lyrical, and then there's like some that are like in the middle.
yeah. I like both, right? So, obviously the battle stuff, right? Like I could rap 100 bars without a hook and just be like, I'll destroy MCs, like that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
But
Is there
but
footage of this somewhere? I feel like I need to see this. I need to see you transform.
there's one of me freestyling in a parking lot in Atlanta when I was like 24,
Okay.
um,
Definitely gotta
and
look that up.
that's on the same. It's on YouTube. It's on the same channel that my Burning Metronome stuff is. If
Okay.
anybody wants to. And then yeah, I'll just give you a link or something. But there's a song I did about police brutality that came out pretty good. This was guest starring with this rock band.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I did like Slick Rick was one of my favorite MCs,
Mm-hmm.
and he's big on storytelling, and so he one of the things I realized is most stories have kind of like the what do they call it, like the three act structure.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and most pop songs, meaning like not jazz songs, not freeform songs,
Yeah.
so hip hop, rock, whatever. Most pop songs are three verses. So I realized, oh, okay, I can tell stories within a song using that three act structure, and so I already kind of started doing that,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so it made it a pretty like natural transition, to jump
That's
into
good.
writing
Nice.
books.
Organic writer energy. That's what this is. Just like, oh, I just see that whole the connection. So then when you came out of insurance, then how did you know that, unless it really is, and I feel like for most people who write, majority of people, it's there's a rigorous element to it in the writing itself, like just
Yeah.
trying to conceptualize. But I also know that there's like a handful of people, because I'm one of them, where it's like, if you give me 5 minutes, I can give you a very detailed story about pretty much anything on the spot. And so it's more about the work is really just, okay, let me set aside the time to write, not necessarily the writing itself. And so some people might be
Well,
daunted by like, writing, and some people are daunted by like, oh, I got to take the time.
oh, okay. Yeah, well, I'm definitely not like you on that regard. Uh, I did spend some time listening to some writers' podcasts to get some ideas about how stories are formulated. Um,
Okay.
there's one called the Writers Podcast, which started with Nerdist. The host is
Oh,
Ben Blacker. He's like a TV writer and a um, comic writer.
okay.
And then he has on like every TV writer and movie writer in the world has been on that podcast. Like,
Got you.
so hearing them talk about their approach was really dope. Uh, but okay, so for me, the idea comes easily, pretty much. The
Mm-hmm.
idea is inspiration, but sitting down to write it is the work. One of the things I've realized, especially now teaching writing, is that um, we all have our different strengths as a writer,
Mm-hmm.
and the areas where we struggle, right? And so if you can identify those things, you can just know, okay, I'm going to work harder on that area where I struggle. So for me, dialogue comes pretty easily, personalities come pretty easily, but the order of events, like things that happen to make the story compelling, don't come as
Yeah,
easily.
like event
So
beats.
yeah, so I work harder on those, and I do those up front.
Okay.
So I work really hard on my outlines to make sure I have those down, because once I have the characters in the situation, I can pretty much just hear what they're going to say. Whereas other people who I've worked with, or it might be the other way around, like the dialogue is what they struggle with, but they really know what's going to happen in the story, you know?
Yeah.
And so, like, yeah, figuring out like what area you struggle with allows you to make a more prudent plan for actually finishing.
Yeah. How detailed do you get with the outlines?
I would say pretty detailed. Yeah, like that's the heavy lifting for me. So,
Okay.
um,
Is it easier for you to write than having like a pretty meaty outline that helps the writing
yeah,
process smooth? Okay.
yeah, because every story is a journey, right? Character begins here, ends up here. They start out rich, they end up poor. They start out lonely, they end up in love, or the other way around.
Yeah.
And the story is all the obstacles in between. That's really, you know, unless you're going like nonlinear French,
Right.
but
That different angle.
right, and people could do that too. But I'm just saying, most stories are a journey,
Yeah.
whether emotional, physical, whatever. So when you know what a character lacks internally, like what it is that like they don't think they're smart, or they don't feel loved, or they don't feel like a part of any group, whatever it is, that it's driving them,
Mm.
then um, you can in the outline you can figure out what their journey is, what their emotional journey is, and then what the external things are, like a Fast and Furious movie, right? If I were going to write a Fast and Furious movie,
Hmm.
um, and I bring in a new character, that character's never felt a part of anything, but then Vin Diesel comes to me and says, "Hey, kid, you're one of us," right?
Yeah.
So like, so the emotional journey is that they are feeling a part of something, and
Yeah.
the places where they're going to come into conflict with people is when that is threatened, because that's what's most important to them,
Right.
right? So, and then some other character, the thing that's important to them is not being a part of something, it's having their voice heard, right?
Mm.
And so the person who wants to be a part of something is less likely to speak a hard truth because they don't want to threaten their place in the group. Whereas
Right.
the person who wants to be heard is definitely going to speak their hard truth. So their internal conflicts bring them into conflict with each other.
Yes.
And so that's the stuff I figure out in the outline stage. And then it's pretty easy to write it after that. Like, and I think a lot of people feel like outlining is going to be like, I don't know, it's going to confine you. too mathematical or whatever. But I often say it's like if me and you decided we are going to take a road trip to New York, right? If I don't have a map, if I don't have any GPS or anything, we're going to end up in Mexico because I have a bad sense of direction, right?
Right.
But if we have something guiding us, even if on the road you say, "Hey, that's the world's biggest rubber band. Let's go see that,"
Yeah.
then we could take that detour and it's fine. And then we can come back and we still know what direction we're headed. And that's the same thing with outlines.
Yeah.
Sometimes you find things in the story and you're like, oh, okay, I didn't think of this. Let's try this out. But you still have a general sense of the direction.
Yeah.
That was like a mini lecture.
Yeah. No, I love it. That is solid. That's solid writing advice. So what have you learned about writing and storytelling from teaching it?
Uh, that's a good question. So I guess we haven't said this explicitly here, but the writing the Burning Metronome led to Regis University reaching out to me to teach graphic novel writing for their master's program, which I never would
Gotcha.
have dreamed of, which is very cool.
Yeah, that's super dope. Yeah, you mentioned that briefly in the TED talk that it like
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm a professor. That's what my card says.
That's right.
So, so I teach there, and I teach at a place called Lighthouse, which is just like adults can take writing classes. There's no like degree; it's just learning how to
Okay.
be a better writer. And both of those are great. And so I've really kind of learned to try to understand what the thing about saying what comes easily to a person. So if they show me kind of what their writing is, and we talk about the process of it, um, instead of giving people hard and fast rules,
Mm-hmm.
like you can't do this, you must do this in every story.
Right.
What I try to do is tell people our time together is about you understanding the tools, and you can decide whether or not to use those tools.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have them, then you always have the option of using them to make the story, right? So like some people, maybe people never outline, but if they understand how the tool works, then they're making a decision out of knowledge, not a decision out of ignorance, right?
Right.
And so like we'll talk about things like inciting incident, like the thing that throws you into your story from the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
or conflict, ticking clock, like all these different pieces
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
writing a dynamic story. And so by concentrating on the tools, it stops people from feeling like they're being forced to write in a way that they don't want to write.
Yes. That's cool. That's cool. So I don't think you mentioned this in the TED talk, or maybe you did. What is your own like background, like educationally? Not that it's a requirement, obviously, to be a good writer, but I'm just curious.
Uh, yeah, I went to college uh, early, actually. I went when I was 16 uh,
Oh wow.
to this college called Simon's Rock. It's in Massachusetts. Nobody's heard of it, and it's okay.
Okay.
But I graduated with the 4 year, like a BA, when I was 19,
Okay.
and then I hated school, and so I always hated school, actually,
Yeah.
like always, and and so I was so happy to be done with it. So
Hmm.
I've never been back, and so
And
so when they
now
asked
you're a
me,
professor.
right, right, so when they asked me to teach there, I was like, for real, all right, cool,
Right. Go ahead and sign the check. Run
yeah.
me the money.
But I think it's something about like being out there and doing it, you
Hmm.
know, that opens up possibilities, right? Like all that stuff I was saying about speaking places. What Regis did initially was have me come and speak at one of their residencies, and
Hmm.
uh, and then while I was there, the guy who ran the program was like, "Hey, I want to talk to you about teaching here," and I was like, "Okay, all right, yeah, right,
Yeah.
right." And so, so that was really dope. And I mean, I write a weekly comic for the Colorado Sun, which is like an online newspaper.
Okay.
Saw these reporters from the Denver Post when they started their own paper, and same thing, they like found me, you know.
Hmm.
So I think if you finish your art and then make enough noise, you know,
Right.
like yeah, because I was like, all right, so now because I put out this book, I'm qualified to teach at a university. Um, I'm not any different than I was 4 years ago. I haven't gotten any smarter. Like, is it, but it's just when you create a thing
Hmm.
and establish yourself in that world, then suddenly people can see you in that role. And I think that's the other thing. Like years working with other rappers, um, they always be wanting to like wait to get signed and stuff. And I'd be like, there's 30 of us. Let's just Wu-Tang this shit. Like, let's do something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think a lot of artists, and especially Black artists, we have because we've been beaten down by a lot of societal things. We are essentially waiting for somebody to tell us that we're a writer, that
Yeah.
we're a painter, that we're a photographer.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, you have to tell them. You know, like they can't imagine. Like if you have an idea for a book, don't tell them about your idea. Make the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
You familiar with Brother Man? Those comics from the '90s? Okay,
I'm not actually.
all right. So these are like three Black comics creators,
Yeah.
and they made comics in the early '90s. It's called Brother Man. It was just a cool super. I know the name is, you know, but it was a cool superhero book.
Yeah.
And the they basically sold their stuff in Black hair shops and
Huh.
Black bookstores. And so I think they were in Chicago. I was in Atlanta, and I would be going to the Black store specifically to get a Brother Man. And they, you know, they might come out like 3 or 4 times a year,
Yeah.
but they were really like one of the first, and they did it all on their own. But they were dealing with way different conditions, right? Back then, if you wanted to print a comic, the minimum order was like I think maybe 10,000.
Whoa.
Just because like the technology was such that you had
Oh,
to
right,
order.
right, right.
Yeah, so if you're spending $1 a book, you still have to have $10,000 to make it happen, right?
Yeah.
And then they had to get out and like build a network of distribution to all of these places, like Black Hair shows. You know, even the Arsenio Hall show back in the day mentioned this comic book. Okay,
Wow.
so
That's big.
yeah, yeah. And so now you just put anything on the internet. Like you can do a webcomic,
That's
but
true.
we're still waiting for people to tell us that we can do it, you know? Or
Yeah.
you can do like I do, which is print, you know, like run a Kickstarter and print them. And I printed 1,000 of the hardcover Burning Metronome. I
Hmm.
printed them in China because it was a lot, you know, a lot more affordable for me.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, there's no reason to be waiting.
Yeah.
You know, like there are plenty of people who are less qualified and less talented than you or any of your listeners, and they ain't waiting. You know.
Yeah. These are facts. These are facts. I love it. There's a few people I would definitely love to have you on a panel with. Okay, so bit of a side pivot a little bit. How do you feed yourself creatively? Because I know like when you're making things, that's like when you got a high output,
Yeah.
it's not talked about, but you gotta have like input. Otherwise, you could not that you run out, but kind of like you dry out. You need something to keep
Yeah.
your gears going. So how do you feed yourself?
Man, come with the good questions. You doing it right on.
Thanks, brother. Thanks.
Before the pandemic, I would go dancing 3 times a week, and that would do
Oh
it
no
for me.
way.
Yeah.
What
So,
kind of dancing?
they, I would go to like a Motown night and old funk and soul stuff, working on
Nice.
like my Michael Jackson spins. And then there was like a hip hop night that I would go to, and sometimes a Sunday afternoon. Like Denver had a lot of good live like DJ, you know, stuff.
Hmm.
And I don't drink or anything, so like I would just go straight to the dance floor.
Yeah,
And so, and, you
that's
know,
cool.
yeah, so I wasn't even supporting the venues I was going to, because they would let me in free. But I would get everybody hyped, you know, because you know, like they a lot of people need to be drunk to dance, right? So,
True, true,
but
true.
I don't, so I'll just
Fair.
go do it, right? So that was good, especially like if I had a problem I was trying to solve in a story. Like I'd be
Mm,
like, you know, in the middle of like, you know, something, right? And then like, oh, and then step to the side of the dance floor and write it in my phone, you know. So
yeah.
that's one way. Um, I think another is watching and reading stories that inspire me.
Okay.
So, you know, Rod Serling from Twilight Zone is one of my biggest influences.
Mm,
Walter Mosley, he writes Black detective mysteries. Uh, he's really strong. Um, on television, the Kings, Robert and Michelle King, they wrote The Good Wife and The Good Fight,
oh. Mm.
and those are both. The Good Wife, I thought I had no interest in watching. I was like another lawyer show,
Right.
but so many writers I respected kept posting about it, and I finally watched it. I was like, this is good, you know. yeah, just watching things that inspire me with writing is really, you know, like Lovecraft Country. That definitely, I was like, yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's how you do that. You know,
That's a masterpiece. That and then Watchmen.
yes, right, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, and so it gets me into like, okay, you know, I need to be stepping my stuff up. All right, let's do
Yeah.
this. You know,
Yeah. Got it. That's cool. And so what is your well, I guess I'll split this into two things. So obviously you're very justice minded. Um,
hmm
how do you balance your intake of what's happening across the political sphere
hmm
with your energy of creating? Because again, it's not talked about a lot, but taking stuff in also takes energy.
yeah,
So, keeping it, what do you keep a beat on, or how do you do that, and then still have your energy for your creating?
yeah. I mean, the world could definitely be overwhelming, especially in the previous 4 years. You know,
To say the
uh,
least.
yeah, and because I write a weekly comic for this newspaper, a lot of it is issues based,
Mm,
and so um, it really is thinking about like how to not be overwhelmed by these things. I would say some of it is the ways that I engage social issues in my art make me feel like I'm able to do something.
okay.
So it brings me some relief, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. As you
Um,
talked about in the TED Talk
yeah, yeah,
matters.
and
Yeah.
in fact, like somebody wrote me about my weekly comic on Friday, and said, and somebody I don't know, you know,
Mhm.
but wrote and said that it always inspires her, and that this latest one made her cry, you know. And I'm not out here trying to like, you know, hurt people, but
Yeah. Yeah.
but you know, I'm glad it's making people think about their lives, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think that's a hard thing. Sometimes I just have to like not do it. I mean, one thing that I have as a hard rule for myself is I don't watch any police murder videos. I don't watch black bodies getting snuffed
Mm,
out. Um, like I don't need to be convinced that it's happening. I know it's happening, so I don't got to watch the videos.
yeah.
That's for
Yeah.
people who don't believe it, right? So that's one layer of protection. I
Yeah.
can read the stories. I'm aware of what's happening, but I do not need to watch somebody being murdered. I just don't, you
Yeah.
know? So that's one way that I save my soul. Um, you know, I think, and then I don't feel like I need to be always tuned in. So um, basically, what I do is I kind of like start my day. I don't say the morning because uh, I'm
I heard
against the
that.
morning.
Start your day.
Yes,
You get to it.
right. So I start my day, you know, I check social media because a lot of people write me for work or whatever to write
Mhm.
something through that. And then, you know, like I'll check a little news. And then maybe at the end of the day, you know, when I'm going to sleep, I might watch like John Oliver Daily Show,
Yeah.
something, you know. Um, but and then if there's like a specific issue that that I want to learn more about, then I'll go research it and check different news sources. But the main thing is that I don't let it consume my day, because you know there are a lot of bad things happening, and the world has been bad before, and
True.
we've still made it through. And it's not to say that I promote not being active, but uh, but I'm not contributing to making a better world by overwhelming and destroying myself.
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
so the best ways I know to contribute are to check in from time to time and engage on the issues that I feel like need to be engaged about. You know,
Yeah. That's
it's a
cool.
difficult balance, but
Yeah.
it's not easy.
Yeah. No, no, it definitely is not. I know it was, well, along with a lot of other people. I was overwhelmed last year because I was taking in too much. And I
Yeah,
realized that I was like, okay, I got to find a different way to approach this because I'm going to kill myself literally watching this and stressing my body out.
right.
And I feel you with the not watching black bodies die thing. I
Yeah,
think it was, I want to say Philando Castile.
yeah,
I saw that and I was like, I've never seen someone get killed before.
Right.
And I was like, I can't do this on a regular. I can't. My body. Maybe some people can, and more power to them. Like journalists who do that. I
Yeah.
was like, this is. I am not wired for this. Like that is like I just watched a murder. Like
Yeah. And it kills you inside, like little by little.
yeah, yeah. And then you put the pieces together, like right in front of his girl, and his kid was in the back, and it's like,
Right.
and it's too much. Yeah. So I definitely feel you on that. That's cool. I want to circle back to something you said earlier, just out of curiosity. So you said you started off drawing comics, and then
Hmm.
when you came back, you started writing. Why'd you come back and not draw?
I hadn't been drawing all those years I was rapping. Like
Oh,
I got yeah, I got decent at it when I was maybe like 14, and then I just stopped.
okay.
Um, but maybe a couple decades later, I had a breakup, and I needed something to like fill the time. And somebody told me there was a comic book group here in Denver, the Denver Drink and Draw. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, what? And I just didn't even have like comic book geek friends to talk about stuff. So I started going, and I started doodling, and got to know all the comics people in Denver.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I will say now I've come back on it because, my love to comics artists, but they are literally the worst. Like literally. Like they asked me if all the artists who asked me to draw stuff, asked me to write stuff, had drawn it, I would have 12 graphic novels instead of two. So, uh, but what I can say is, in their defense, comics are very labor intensive, right? Like it's
Yeah.
drawing 100 tiny drawings per chapter, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so they have all of the same insecurities as every other artist, and they have all that labor on top of them. So like whenever you're reading a Marvel or DC book and you're like, why did they switch artists? The other artist was better. It's because the good artist didn't hit the deadline. That's really what happens, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I've just kind of gotten to the point where so many stories have died in artists' hands that I have to
Mm.
start drawing some. Um, so I have yeah, I've started drawing again, and it's okay. It's all right. It gets my story told. Um,
Gotcha.
and the next Burning Metronome that'll be the first, like it's like a 13-page story, and I drew that one
Mm-hmm.
because I had an artist and she dropped out. So
Ah, gotcha.
yeah, and I was just like, okay, I guess I'll draw it. But
Yeah.
and
Where
yeah,
do you go to
and
find
it's,
artists?
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I said, where
Oh,
do you
where?
go to find artists?
Oh, okay. For some reason, I heard fine artist.
Oh,
Yeah.
this is not that kind of
Yeah.
a show.
uh, so some of it is relationship based, like people just in town.
Hmm.
Some of it, as you go to conventions, you get to know people. And then, sometimes you can find people on like Fiverr. And, you know, I wrote a couple of stories for this company called Zenoscope. They're known for like these sort of TNA comics, but
Okay.
I wrote I wrote like they have a horror anthology, and I wrote two horror comics for them. And there was an artist in the Philippines who was really dope and who
Hmm.
drew the story that I wrote. And so he and I talked about perhaps doing something, but we'll see.
Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is like the permanent artist catchphrase. We'll see.
Yeah. There was somebody who popped up who asked me to write something and popped up a few months ago, and it had been 2 years
Oh
since I had
wow.
written it. Yeah. And he told me it'd be done in like 3 months. And they try to pop up like, hey, I'm ready to do this now. And I was like, nah, man, I don't want to do this,
Right. You've
Um,
communicated plenty about what your work ethic is.
right. But those, so when I find the ones who are on it,
Mm-hmm.
if
That's
I
what
can
you do.
afford them, those are the ones I stick with. There's a guy,
Yeah.
Johan Yates, who drew like a Burning Metronome one shot, and he drew like Tales from the Crypt and Ninjago and Gumby.
Okay.
That dude is about it. That dude never misses a deadline. He
Yeah.
deserves every bit of money he asks for, and I just can't always afford it. But
Yeah.
that dude is the truth.
Got
Like
it.
anytime I get to work with him, I'm happy about it.
Yeah. That's cool. That's cool. All right. So as we're wrapping up, um,
Yeah.
what are you reading now, or what are you watching now that's got your interest?
Hmm. Well, I just finished WandaVision, and yeah, that was cool. It was very different.
Yeah.
Uh,
It was a wildly experimental show.
Definitely, yeah. Um, and I'm reading Invisible Men, which is a book about the unknown black artist in comics from
Oh,
the Golden Age.
okay.
And
Unfamiliar.
oh, it's great. Because there's all these brothers that I never knew, like brothers who drew like a brother drew Blue Beetle, like the Golden Age version of Blue Beetle.
Wow.
Yeah, and so like from the 30s and 40s and 50s, all these black artists who were drawing comics that I've never heard of.
Yeah.
There's a guy Matt Baker who drew these really like beautiful, like pinup girl kind of things.
Hmm.
Where like if he had been, if most of society had known he was black, they would have like maybe tried to lynch him for drawing pretty white women, you know.
Yeah.
And here he is like making a living off of it. Like,
Yeah.
so that book is really interesting. In fact, on my TED Talk, it's listed. There's like an option. There's like a tab you can click for like suggested reading,
Hmm.
and that book is one of the ones that's listed.
Okay.
Um, and then I just read Revival from Image Comics. I read the whole series.
Okay.
Um,
What was that like?
that was fun. It's like people come back from the dead, and
Okay.
but they're not zombies. They're like they just there. They inhabit the town, and I think that idea's been done in a lot of other ways. So it probably maybe it won't get picked up as a TV show, but it was fun. It was a fun journey.
Yeah.
Oh, but the zaniest thing I read in 2020 was Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. That's by Matt Fraction, and it's crazy, crazy. Like
Really?
Jimmy Olsen and Batman get into a prank war, and it's so funny, man. Uh,
Wow.
Jimmy Olsen steals the Batmobile's wheel. That's the only spoiler I throw at you. But
Okay.
like, but he
Because
sings
now
the
I
whole
saw.
like the Batmobile. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, right.
Batmobile lost as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, oh man, I enjoyed it. I read it twice because it was just so madcap.
Yeah. That's fun. That's cool. And if you can say, do you have anything on the horizon? Like what's up and coming for you?
All right. So first of all, I write that weekly comic. You can see it for free at coloradosun.com. The weekly
Okay.
comic is called What I Miss, and
Ooh.
a new episode comes out every Friday. It's drawn by Corey Redford. She's really dope.
Nice.
So that's every week and that's free. And we're about to do a compilation of those because we've been doing it for 2 years. The second Burning Metronome is drawn and is being colored right now.
Nice.
So that's on the horizon. I put out Anguish Garden, which was an allegory for leaving white supremacist movements.
Whoa.
Basically, it was like a girl in the future after an alien war. And it's funny, I wrote it before coronavirus, but people are afraid that people are infected by the aliens. So it's
Mm.
her job to bounty hunt those people and force them into a quarantine. Um,
Wow.
yeah, isn't that funny?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
wild.
I'm like, coronavirus is biting me, man. So that's a 3-book series I've written. The first one is out. It came out a couple months ago. And
Okay.
all of those are on my
Graphic
website.
novels?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Like 80-page graphic novels. And so there's 2 more that I'm going to write. And so those are, that's on, my website is R. Allen Writes. And so that's on there.
Okay.
Then my podcast is called Motherfucking Cape, which I know is a very subtle name.
Just a little bit. Get people sure what it's about.
Right. And I get to, I've interviewed some cool people. So there's some new ones coming up. I interviewed Nalo Hopkinson. That's one of the most recent ones.
Okay.
She
Nice.
she wrote one of the Sandman universe comics.
Oh, from the
Yeah,
when they did that, like it wasn't really like a reboot, but like yeah, when they
yeah,
continued the storyline. Yeah,
yeah.
that's cool.
And she was handpicked by Neil Gaiman. She was one of the people, and she's a
Nice.
sister and has written a lot of black like sci-fi. And one of the other interviews was Francesca Sloan, who's a TV writer. She
Nice.
uh she wrote on Fargo and seasons 3 and 4 of Atlanta, which are not out yet.
Really?
Yeah, and then did you see the announcement for the new Mr. and Mrs. Smith with
Yeah, with Glover and
yeah,
can't remember her name.
Phoebe Waller
Yeah, yeah.
Bridges. So Francesca's the third creator. So the 3 of them created that show together.
Wow.
So in that interview, she's talking about it, but she's not saying what it is because they haven't announced it yet.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool. So you can find all that stuff on iTunes.
That's super cool.
Yeah, and then and I wrote a movie that we're supposed to shoot in September,
Nice.
and
I was
that's
gonna ask if you had any like screenwriting aspirations.
yeah. So my homeboy that I grew up with in Atlanta, he's a director. Atlanta, became like it, right?
Right.
They tore
Right.
down a mall I used to go to when I was 14 and built a movie studio there. But
Right.
yeah, so one of my homeboys, he's done movies for like Lifetime, BET, like those kind of channels,
Oh.
and he wanted to do a feature, and so I wrote something for him a couple years ago that would just, and we had gotten financing for it, and
Mm-hmm.
then the pandemic hit, and the financier backed out. Um, but we did a web series
Interesting.
about it that's on YouTube called "Making Our First Movie."
Okay.
I told you, I'm doing all the stuff, man. Like I'm
Yeah,
not
I
waiting on
do.
nobody, right?
I feel you. Got to have your fingers
Yeah,
in all the pies. Yeah.
yeah. So we're supposed to shoot that in September. We'll see if if everything goes well.
Yeah.
And that'll be
That's
the
cool.
first movie I've ever written. And that's not anything supernatural. It's just a political thriller.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, I don't know. Oh, and the free comics. You can read some free stuff on our Alan Wrights. Like I have free comics that people can read so they can kind of check out what I do.
Right.
And then I occasionally write educational comics for this nonprofit called Pop Culture Classroom.
Okay.
Uh, they put out comics that are free for anybody to download about historical figures. And I've written, I wrote one about Nat Love, Black Cowboy, and
Yes.
then Barney Ford, who nobody has heard of, but we all should know. That brother escaped slavery and became a millionaire.
I did hear about him like
Yeah,
recently, very, very recently.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I wrote a two-page comic about him, but all that stuff is on popcultureclassroom.org. You can
Gotcha.
read those
Is it
comics.
for like kids? Like what's the educational age range?
Yeah, it's definitely aimed towards kids. I think they start like middle school and higher.
Okay.
But so they hire a lot of writers, a lot of artists. I think I wrote maybe 12 for them, 12 different stories, and it's all different artists.
Yeah.
So like if you go to download them, like basically you go there and you go to their store and select it. You could download it for free, and it has like a teaching guide and a copy of the script, and
Wow.
like so you can
Okay.
see kind of how it all came
Yeah.
together. Yeah, so that's pretty dope. It's just free. It's aimed at educators to be able to use to teach these
That is
historical
awesome.
figures' lives. Yeah,
Yes.
so that's really dope, and that's all the stuff I can think of right now.
Awesome. That's cool. That's cool. That's cool. Well, thank you, man, for being on our show. This was a great conversation. I loved it.
Yeah, likewise. I agree. Yeah, right on. Thank you for having me.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Talk story to me.